At noon in a bustling city park, a humble black chef was eating lunch when he noticed a young white Latin girl crying, lost and unable to speak English. While everyone else passed by without a glance, he stepped in, offering food, comfort, and calling the police. But when the girl's wealthy parents arrived, all eyes turned to him with suspicion until the truth came out. A surprising gift was given, and his life was about to change forever. Before we dive in this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thoughts. It was just past noon in Central Park, and New York buzzed with its usual restless rhythm. The sun pierced through the branches above, casting sharp shadows onto the winding paths where joggers passed in wireless silence. Tourists snapped photos near the fountains, and business people clutched salads and cell phones, rushing past without looking up. The spring air was warm but thick, humming with life, horns in the distance and the faint sound of a saxophone drifting from the 72nd Street entrance. Near a large sycamore tree just off the path stood a little girl. No more than 6, maybe 7. Her skin was pale, her curly brown hair pulled into loose pigtails, now frizzy from the heat. She wore a pink jacket, one sleeve slightly torn, and clutched a phone with both trembling hands. Tears ran down her cheeks as she whispered in Spanish into the device, her voice barely audible between gasps. Mama, Papa. ¿Dónde están? People passed. Some glanced, none stopped. One woman in yoga gear furrowed her brow and kept walking. A man in a suit looked at the girl, then away. Faster. A group of teens laughed nearby, oblivious. The girl tried to move closer to the walking path, waving the phone, but her small voice was swallowed whole by the noise of the city. At a bench a few feet away, 3 men sat eating lunch. One of them, tall, broad-shouldered, maybe in his early 30s, paused. His skin was a warm dark brown. Short-cropped hair, a neatly trimmed beard, wearing a plain gray t-shirt and jeans still stained faintly with grease. He held a half-eaten sandwich in one hand, the other resting on his lap. His name was Malcolm. He was a chef at a small Harlem bistro. He loved food, jazz, and quiet moments like this between shifts. But more than anything, Malcolm noticed things. He noticed the girl. He stood, slowly, wiping his hands on a napkin, his friends pausing mid-conversation. As Malcolm approached, a white woman jogging by gave him a suspicious glance, then looked at the girl and back at him, her pace subtly quickening. A middle-aged man nearby watched with narrowed eyes. One woman actually pulled her child closer as she passed. Malcolm felt it, the tension, the judgment, the unspoken equation people in this city often made. Black man plus white child equals danger. But he didn't stop, didn't hesitate, because the little girl was shaking, lost, and crying, and no one else was doing a damned thing. He crouched a few feet from her, his voice soft but steady. Hey, it's okay, I'm not going to hurt you. You hungry? He slowly offered the sandwich, still wrapped in its paper. She flinched at first, then looked up, eyes wide and wet. He smiled. Not too big, not too sudden, gentle, safe. And just like that, the world kept rushing by. But one man chose to pause. One man, despite every look, every whisper, every assumption, decided to see her, not as a stranger, not as a problem, but as a child in need. The sandwich trembled slightly in Malcolm's outstretched hand, the wrapper crinkling in the breeze. The girl's eyes darted between the food and the stranger's face, her breathing still jagged, small shoulders heaving beneath her pink jacket. Malcolm kept his posture low, non-threatening, like he'd learned working with kids at the community kitchen back home in Brooklyn. It's just turkey and cheese, he added, nodding toward it like it was a secret treasure. A pretty good one, too. I made it myself. His voice was calm, deep, with the kind of rhythm that didn't rush, didn't push, just waited. She didn't take the sandwich, not yet. But she didn't back away either. That was something. Malcolm glanced around, noticed the same woman from before still watching from a distance, phone halfway out of her pocket. Another guy across the path had stopped to tie his shoe, but was clearly just staring. Malcolm was used to this. Not just the looks, but the silent accusations behind them. He'd lived a lifetime of them. At 17, he'd once helped a kid who fell off his bike in Queens and ended up being questioned for 20 minutes by cops who assumed he'd shoved him. Since then, he'd learned to stay invisible when things got tense, but not today, not for this little girl. She mumbled something again in Spanish. Quiet, stuttered. Malcolm didn't understand much, but he heard the panic in her voice, something like papa and no sé dónde. He softened further. You speak Spanish? She blinked at him, confused, maybe unsure he was talking to her. He smiled again. Okay, no worries. My Spanish is trash, he chuckled, pointing at himself. But I got hands and sandwiches. That's universal, right? A moment passed, then two, and finally, slowly, she reached for the sandwich. Her fingers were small, the knuckles pink and scraped like she'd fallen earlier. She took it, barely unwrapped the edge, and bit in, cautiously, eyes never leaving Malcolm. He sat down gently on the path, giving her space. See, not poisoned. He took a bite from his own sandwich to match. My name's Malcolm, by the way, he added, pointing to himself. Malcolm. He repeated it slower, then gestured to her with a gentle nod. She hesitated, then muttered, Sophia. Her voice cracked on the second syllable. Malcolm nodded. Sophia. Pretty name. He paused, let the silence stretch a little, not wanting to overwhelm her. You with your parents today? Her face changed instantly, the sandwich halting halfway to her mouth. Her eyes welled up again. Gone, she whispered. No mama, no papa, I don't know. Her English was shaky, barely hanging together, but the fear in it hit Malcolm like a gut punch. He looked down, inhaled through his nose slowly, forcing his own surge of anger back into control. Not at her, but at the people who'd walked past her like she was invisible, a lost child in the middle of a packed park, and nobody had the decency to care. His thoughts drifted to his own baby cousin, Jayla, back in Brooklyn. What if it were her? A breeze rustled the leaves above. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked and a bell rang from an ice cream cart. But it all felt distant now. Malcolm turned to his backpack, still resting near the bench, pulled out a bottle of water and offered it to Sophia. Here, he said gently. You need this more than me. She took it, eyes not quite trusting, but not afraid anymore. He glanced back at his friends, still sitting on the bench, watching. One of them, Theo, raised his brows, mouthing something like, You good? Malcolm gave a small nod. He was more than good. He was doing what needed to be done. He turned back to the girl. Do you know your mom's name, Dad's, their phone? She shook her head, then opened her small purse and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. On it was a phone number written in shaky handwriting, probably by one of her parents. Malcolm took it carefully, then pulled out his phone. Before he dialed, he looked at Sophia again. I'm going to call this number, okay? Maybe we can find them. You just sit here with me, all right? Eat that sandwich. That's priority 1. She gave a tiny nod, then took another bite. As he typed in the number, his fingers paused. He hesitated for a beat. What if they didn't pick up? What if it was the wrong number? Or worse, what if someone else saw him with her before help arrived and made a scene? He shook off the thought. Fear never solved anything. He hit the call button. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. Malcolm frowned. He tried again. Still no answer. Sophia was watching him, her lower lip trembling. It's okay, he said quickly, pocketing the phone. We'll figure this out. His voice was firm now, like he needed her to believe it, like he needed to believe it himself. He stood up, glanced at the small cluster of people who had subtly gathered nearby, pretending not to stare. One man whispered to another, eyes narrowed, arms crossed. Malcolm caught it. He always caught it. The calculation happening behind their eyes. How a black man next to a white child couldn't possibly mean well. He turned his body slightly, shielding Sophia with his presence. Screw them. He didn't know them comfort. Then another thought struck. Cops. Maybe they could help, but he didn't love the idea. Calling the police as a black man in this situation felt like playing Russian roulette. Still, what choice did he have? She needed more than sandwiches and hope. Hey, he said, crouching again beside Sophia. "We're going to get someone to help find your folks, okay? I might have to call the police, but don't be scared. I'll be right here the whole time. Promise." She blinked, slowly nodding. There was trust now. Not full, not complete, but something had started. Malcolm stood, pulled out his phone again, and dialed 911. The operator picked up with a sterile efficiency. "NYPD emergency, what's your situation?" He cleared his throat, glancing at the people around again. "Yeah, I've got a kid here, probably 6 or 7, Spanish-speaking, lost in Central Park near the Bethesda Terrace. Name's Sophia. I'm not her parent, I just found her. She's scared, she's eating now, but she's alone." There was a pause on the other end. Then instructions. "Stay put." An officer would be sent. Malcolm agreed, thanked them, hung up. And then, slowly, he sat back down on the curb beside Sophia. She looked up at him, eyes slightly calmer now. She held out the sandwich toward him, offering a piece with both hands, the crust bent and soggy from her grip. He chuckled. "Nah, you keep it. You need the energy, kid." They sat there, two strangers on the edge of a path worn down by thousands of hurried footsteps, sharing a moment as the city thundered on without them. In the background, people still stared. But Sophia ate, and Malcolm waited. And in that silence, something small but unshakable took root between them. Trust. Real, fragile, and deeply human. It began with a phone camera. A woman in a tan jacket stood off to the side, half hidden behind a lamppost, holding her phone just high enough to capture the scene. Malcolm saw her through the corner of his eye, the way her brows knit tight, not in sympathy, but in suspicion. A man next to her whispered something, and she nodded subtly, lips pressed thin. They weren't watching Sophia. They were Malcolm didn't move. Didn't flinch. But his fingers curled slightly on his knee, knuckles whitening for just a second before he released the tension. He was used to eyes like that. Ones that didn't see a person, only the color of skin, and the threat they imagined came with it. Sophia, still chewing the last bit of sandwich, leaned against his arm without realizing it. That small gesture, completely innocent, only seemed to sharpen the stares. He heard a murmured, "Is that his kid?" float from behind him. Then, "Should we call someone?" And another voice, quiet but edged with judgment. "This doesn't look right." Malcolm kept his eyes forward, breathing slow, controlled. He didn't want to scare Sophia by reacting, but the pressure was rising. He could feel the narrative writing itself in real time, by people who knew nothing but assumed everything. One wrong move, one raised voice, one gesture misunderstood, and this could go sideways. He'd seen it happen before. Hell, he'd lived versions of it. A voice came from above. "Sir?" Malcolm turned his head slowly. A man in a blue polo, mid-40s, white, with a dad-like haircut and sunglasses dangling from his collar, stood a few feet away. His tone was polite on the surface, but there was an undertone to it, a mixture of caution and performance, like he was talking to a stray dog that might bite. "Everything all right here?" Malcolm replied evenly. "Yeah. The kid's lost. I called the cops, they're on their way." He gestured toward his phone lying on the bench beside them. The man nodded slowly, but didn't leave. "You don't know her?" "No," Malcolm said, and then, softer, "Not until a few minutes ago." The man's jaw tightened. "So you're not related?" It wasn't a question. Malcolm exhaled through his nose, kept his voice calm. "She was crying, alone. Nobody else stopped. What would you have done?" The man didn't answer. Just gave another one of those vague, ambiguous nods and backed away, but not before glancing down at Sophia like he expected her to suddenly scream for help. She didn't. She just leaned a little closer to Malcolm. Minutes dragged. The crowd swelled slowly, people pretending not to watch but making no effort to hide it. Malcolm's friends had walked over now, sensing the shift in energy. Theo, the tall one with locks pulled into a bun, leaned in close. "Man," he murmured, "you sure you want to be in this alone?" Malcolm nodded. "She's scared, man. She don't need a bunch of strangers hovering. Theo looked around. Yeah, well, some of these strangers looked ready to call the whole SWAT team. Before Malcolm could respond, a siren blipped once, sharp and brief. A police cruiser pulled up at the edge of the lawn, tires crunching against gravel as it slowed. 2 officers stepped out. One was young, Latino, maybe 25. The other, older, white, with a buzz cut and the kind of jawline Malcolm had seen too many times in mugshots of the wrong people. The crowd shifted, giving them space. Malcolm felt the girl stiffen. He leaned down slightly. Hey, it's okay. These folks are gonna help. He said it like he believed it. He hoped it wasn't a lie. The older cop approached first. His eyes landed on Malcolm, then dropped briefly to the girl, then back to Malcolm with practiced neutrality. You the one who called? Yeah, Malcolm said, rising slowly but keeping his hands visible, non-threatening. My name's Malcolm Grant. This girl, Sophia. She was alone near the tree. Crying, scared. She speaks mostly Spanish. I gave her food and called the number she had on her, but nobody answered, so I called you. He said it clean, clearly, every word deliberate. The younger officer crouched next to Sophia, speaking softly in Spanish. Her eyes widened a little. Then she nodded, starting to answer. The words came out choppy but understandable. She pointed at Malcolm. Él me ayudó. Él me dio comida. The officer nodded gently, asking something else. She hesitated, then held out the paper with the number. He took it, glanced at his partner, and they stepped aside to radio in. Malcolm stood still, feeling all the tension running down his spine, like someone had dropped a string of ice cubes inside his shirt. The older officer kept looking at him. Not hostile, but not kind either. Calculating. Reading. Judging. Malcolm met his eyes and held them. He wasn't going to shrink under it. Eventually, the younger cop returned. She's not hurt, she's just scared. Lost track of her parents while they were walking near the mall entrance. He turned to Malcolm. Thanks for doing the right thing. Malcolm nodded. Yeah, she's just a kid. The cop gave a small smile. Real or performative, Malcolm couldn't tell. But before the moment could settle, another voice cut through the noise. Excuse me? A man, maybe late 30s, balding, sharp suit, stepped through the forming ring of spectators. What's going on here? His accent was Latin American, thick with panic. He rushed towards Sophia, and the girl cried out, Papa, and ran into his arms. Everyone froze. The man scooped her up, clutched her tight, eyes wild. Dios mío, Sophia, mi vida! A woman appeared behind him seconds later, high heels clicking, hair tied in a sleek bun, gold bracelet flashing under the sun. She looked between Sophia and the officers, then her eyes landed on Malcolm. There was a moment, not of joy, not yet, first confusion, then alarm. Her mouth opened slightly. She stepped in front of her daughter as if shielding her from Malcolm. Who is he? She asked, sharply, her voice firm, cold. What was he doing with our daughter? Malcolm didn't say anything at first. He didn't need to. The younger cop intervened gently. He's the one who found her, gave her food, called us, stayed with her until we got here. The woman's brows knit. Her lips parted again, searching for something, maybe an apology, maybe another question, but her husband looked at Malcolm then, and something shifted in his expression. Still holding Sophia, he simply said, Thank you. Malcolm nodded. Once. She was hungry. The moment lingered. The weight of it all, fear, bias, assumptions, settled into the space between them like fog, but it wasn't over yet. The looks weren't gone, the whispers hadn't stopped, the story hadn't resolved itself with one word of thanks. But for the first time since he'd stood up from that bench, Malcolm felt something give. Not much, but enough. The officers led the family away to take statements. Sophia looked back once, eyes searching for him. Malcolm lifted his hand, waved lightly. She smiled. Small, soft, real. And then she disappeared into the crowd. Malcolm turned back toward the bench, where his friends were waiting in silence. Theo broke it first. That could have gone way worse. Malcolm didn't answer right away. He just sat down, reached for the last half of his sandwich and stared at it. Yeah, he said quietly, but it didn't. Then almost to himself, not this time. The park had started to thin out by the time the rumble of the engine rolled in. Most of the onlookers had drifted away, pulled back into their own lives once it was clear the drama was over. Or so they thought. The sun had shifted low in the sky, casting longer shadows between the trees, gilding everything in a soft, warm hue. Malcolm was still sitting on the bench, half-heartedly chewing the last bite of his sandwich when he heard the sound. Low, smooth, expensive, he looked up. The Bentley didn't just drive, it glided, every inch of it polished to a mirror finish. Deep charcoal gray, understated but unmistakable, the kind of car that didn't need to prove anything because it had already won. It rolled to a gentle stop along the park edge, tires whispering against the curb. The door opened, and the man from earlier stepped out. Sophia's father, now composed but alert, his arm cradling his daughter protectively. He was followed by the woman, her heels clicking sharp against the pavement, posture tall and guarded. She scanned the area again like something might still threaten them, and for a moment her eyes flicked back to Malcolm. She didn't speak at first, just stood near the open door, holding Sophia's small pink backpack in one hand. Malcolm noticed now how perfect her blouse was. White, silk, not a wrinkle in sight. Gold chain at her collar, tiny diamond studs in her ears. The way she held herself said wealth and power, but more than that, it said control. People like her weren't used to vulnerability, especially not in public. Malcolm stood slowly, brushing crumbs from his jeans. He didn't move toward them, just offered a small nod, cautious. The father took a step forward, Sophia still in his arms, her small hands clutching the collar of his shirt. She didn't want to leave without saying goodbye, he said, voice lower now, without the edge it had earlier. He looked tired, drained in a way only parents who faced the sudden terror of a missing child would understand. Sophia peeked out from his shoulder. "Malcolm," she said, the words soft but clear. Malcolm smiled, just a little. "You okay, Sophia?" She nodded. "You find Mama and Papa," she added, like it was some kind of magical power he had. "You make sandwich?" That pulled a short, surprised laugh from the father. The woman didn't laugh. But she stepped forward, her heels quiet now on the path. Her expression was complicated, tension mixed with hesitation, a flicker of something like shame behind her eyes. "I was scared," she said finally, voice quieter than before, more human. "When I saw you with her, I didn't know what to think." Malcolm nodded. "I get that," he said, and he did. He got it better than she probably realized. She was alone, crying. Nobody else even slowed down. "I just did what anyone should have." He didn't say it with pride or bitterness, just truth. The woman looked down at her daughter, then back at Malcolm. "Thank you," she said, and this time it wasn't cold or forced. Her voice cracked ever so slightly on the word. We owe you more than that." She stepped closer, offering her hand. "My name's Camille Vargas." He shook it, firm but not tight. "Malcolm Grant." Her husband joined them. "Javier," he said simply. "We run a foundation," he added, as if that explained who they were. And maybe it did. The name Vargas was vaguely familiar now that Malcolm thought about it. He'd probably seen it on a plaque or a gala invite back when his restaurant tried to partner with food relief programs. Camilla was still watching him. "You didn't hesitate, even with the way people looked at you, even when the police came. That means something." Her eyes lingered longer this time. Not appraising, but evaluating, really seeing him. "You're a good man, Malcolm." Malcolm looked down for a second, then met her eyes again. "I'm just a guy who had a sandwich and a little time," he said, but his voice was a little rough now. He hadn't realized until then how tight his chest had been, not from fear, but from restraint. From holding it all in, the stares, the tension, the silence he'd swallowed, so Sophia wouldn't be scared. Xavier reached into the car and handed something to Camila, a small envelope. She held it for a second, then offered it to Malcolm. "Please, she said. "It's not payment, it's gratitude, and a way to stay in touch. We'd like to do something more. For you, for your work. I heard you're a chef." Malcolm blinked. "From who?" She smiled faintly. "Your friend with the bun?" She nodded toward Theo in the distance. "Hell, filled us in." Malcolm took the envelope, unsure what to say. "You don't need to—" "We know," Javier interrupted gently. "But we want to." For a second, the three of them just stood there. These people from different worlds, held together by a child and a moment of decency. Malcolm looked at Sophia, still watching him from her father's arms. She gave a tiny wave. He returned it with a peace sign, 2 fingers raised. Her smile was small but bright. The Bentley's back door opened again, waiting. Camila placed a hand on Sophia's back and guided her gently inside. Javier lingered a second longer. "Some days," he said, almost to himself, "you get a reminder that good people still exist." He looked Malcolm in the eye. "You reminded me." And then he was gone too, sliding into the car, the door closing with a soft click. The engine hummed back to life. As it pulled away, Malcolm caught a last glimpse of Sophia's face pressed to the window, her breath fogging the glass. She waved again, and then the car disappeared down the drive, swallowed by the city. The park was quiet now. The tension that had once coiled through the air had lifted, like a storm that had passed without breaking. Malcolm stood alone for a while, staring at the spot where the Bentley had been. Then, slowly, he looked down at the envelope still in his hand. It was thick. He didn't open it, not yet. Behind him, Theo approached with a slow shake of the head. "Man," he muttered, "only you would turn a lunch break into a whole damn movie." Malcolm chuckled, low and tired. "I didn't mean to, I just couldn't walk past her." Theo clapped a hand on his shoulder. "That's why you're different, bro. That's why people trust you." Malcolm didn't answer, just looked back out at the path where Sophia had stood, where fear had once lived and now, maybe, didn't any more. For the first time that day, he let out a breath that was deep and real, and this time there were no eyes on him, no whispers, just the rustle of trees and the soft thud of footsteps in the distance. For once, silence felt like peace. The doorbell chimed with a soft jingle as Malcolm pushed into the bistro, the familiar scent of roasted garlic and thyme greeting him like an old friend. It had been 6 days since that afternoon in Central Park, and the world had moved on, as it always does. The story never made the news, never went viral, and maybe that was for the best. Malcolm didn't do it for attention. He came back to work the next day like he always did. Prep at 9 a.m., doors open by 11:30, lunch rush at noon sharp. He chopped onions, seared chicken, tasted sauces, and said little. But the envelope stayed in his coat pocket, unopened for 2 days, until one night after closing, when he finally tore it open at his locker. Inside was a handwritten note in elegant script from Camila Vargas. It was short, direct, but laced with emotion, an apology, a thank you, and an invitation. A small business card was tucked behind it, bearing the name of the Vargas Foundation and a private number. Below that, a folded check. Malcolm hadn't meant to look, but his eyes landed on the amount anyway. Too generous, almost absurd. He'd stared at it in silence for a long time, not sure what to feel. Grateful, yes, but something more complicated too. Something that had to do with dignity and timing and a life spent working twice as hard just to be trusted half as much. Now, standing behind the counter again, sleeves rolled up, apron tied tight around his waist, Malcolm was back in his rhythm. Knife in hand, he moved through the prep list with a calm ease, the kind that came from years of routine layered with purpose. But that morning had a different beat to it. There was something in the air, a quiet anticipation. Even the sous chef noticed. "You're extra zen today," she joked, slicing radishes beside him. "You win the lottery or something?" Malcolm just smiled. "Nah, just slept good for once." It wasn't until the lunch crowd had thinned and the hum of conversation faded into light jazz that the front door opened again. The hostess greeted someone, then turned toward the kitchen, eyes wide. "Malcolm, there's someone here for you." He wiped his hands on a towel, confused. When he stepped out into the dining area, he froze. There she was. Camila Vargas stood near the entrance, out of place but somehow not uncomfortable. She wore jeans this time, a soft navy coat, hair down in relaxed waves. No earrings, no polished armor, just a quiet calm in her expression. In her hands she carried a small box, wrapped in brown paper and twine. When she saw Malcolm, her posture relaxed. "I hope I'm not intruding," she said, voice gentler than before. "I wanted to come in person." Malcolm glanced around. A few regulars looked up from their plates, curious. "You're good," he said, stepping closer. "Didn't expect to see you again, though." She nodded, offering the box. "This is for you. From Sophia." He took it carefully, set it on the counter beside them. Inside, resting atop tissue paper, was a sandwich. His sandwich, or at least an attempt at it. The bread was clumsily sliced, the turkey folded unevenly, one corner smeared generously with mustard. On top of the sandwich, a folded piece of pink construction paper. A child's drawing, stick figures, one tall, dark brown with a big smile, one small holding his hand. Above them, in big crooked letters, "Gracias, amigo." Malcolm stared at it for a long time, throat tightening in a way he hadn't expected. When he looked back up, Camila was watching him, not with pity but something like admiration. "She made it herself," she said. "Said it had to be turkey and cheese. Said you're her hero." He laughed softly under his breath. "I'm just a guy who happened to be there." "You were there," she replied. "That's more than most." She glanced around the bistro. "This place, it's yours?" He nodded. "Head chef, part owner now. We built it from scratch." He gestured toward the kitchen. "Community kitchen on weekends. Teach some of the local kids how to cook. It's nothing fancy, but it's ours." Camilla took a slow breath. "The foundation wants to help. Not just a donation, something sustainable. We'd love to partner with you. Expand your kitchen work, bring it into other neighborhoods. We can handle logistics, space, even fund it, but only if you want it." He didn't respond right away. That kind of offer, it was rare and dangerous if taken blindly. But something in her tone told him this wasn't about image or charity. It was about something real, something earned. "I'll think about it," he said, and meant it. She smiled. "That's all I ask." Then, glancing at her watch, she took a small step back. "I should let you get back to your real work." Before she turned to leave, she added, "Malcolm? What you did for my daughter changed how I see things, people, myself." Her voice wavered just a little. "You reminded me that kindness doesn't always look like we expect it to. But it shows up anyway." Malcolm gave a small nod, his hand resting on the counter beside the sandwich box. "I'm glad she's safe," he said. "That's what matters." Camila left with a final glance and a soft goodbye. The door closed behind her with a chime. He stood there a moment longer, then looked back down at the drawing. The pink crayon was smudged where Sophia had pressed too hard. The smile on the stick figure version of him stretched nearly ear to ear. Later that evening, after the last customer left and the lights dimmed to a soft glow, Malcolm sat alone at the corner table, the sandwich still untouched beside him. He didn't feel like eating. He just sat with the drawing, turning it over slowly in his hands. In a world so often loud with judgment and silence, this small gesture, the drawing, the sandwich, the wave from a Bentley window, felt louder than all of it, not because it was grand, but because it was honest. A kind of full-circle truth. He thought about Sophia, about the way she'd leaned into him without thinking, about the look in her parents' eyes once they understood. He thought about how easy it would have been to walk past her, like everyone else had. How easy and how wrong. Malcolm leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly, the last of the day settling into his chest. Maybe the city didn't change, maybe the world didn't shift, but something small had, and sometimes that was enough. Outside, the street was quiet. Inside, the bistro hummed with silence and warmth. the kind that comes not from ovens or stoves, but from doing the right thing, simply and fully, when no one expects it. And for once, Malcolm allowed himself to feel proud. Not loud, not loud at all, just quietly, deeply proud. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.